Hello and howdy YouTube, this is Team Peeporimo, and we are here today because we're going to be talking about a Banlist discussion, but it's not going to be your normal Banlist discussion. We're going to be talking more or less about what our thoughts on how a Banlist should be, what our ideal Banlist would actually look like, and certain things with regards to that. But before we get into that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody here because we have other team members for our podcast for today. So first and foremost, I would like to introduce the sous chef of sous ships, Forbes. How you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm all right. So I'm doing good. Just did the pre-release today. We're dating ourselves, but
excellent. Next, we have the gentleman who, speaking of the pre-release, actually went undefeated today in the pre-release. We have Mr. Toby. How are you, sir?
Doing all right. Trying to ride the wave.
There we go. And last, but definitely not least, we have the gentleman who is on the East Coast. We have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Christian. How's it going?
Going pretty good today.
Awesome. Always good to hear.
Alrighty. Best mic.
Yes, there's me. And so my name is Michael, and I'll be the one basically leading us through this awesome adventure. And so today, what we will be discussing, though, is the ban list. And since with the pre-release of Cyberstorm Access, we have anticipated that there may be another ban list coming for the current TCG format. Or a lot of players are speculating this, and I know a lot of YouTubers are already talking about what they think is going to be on the list or what's going to be taken off. And with the ban list right around the corner, with the new format, it would be interesting to see kind of if there is anything that will basically that could be hit on the ban list that would shake up the metagame. So with that being said, though, why don't we just go ahead and start talking a little bit about this format? So Toby, you want to go ahead and kind of talk to us about the format? Especially since you played today. Anything that you would like to basically throw out at us?
Just from my initial impression on how the format's shaping up, obviously people have been talking about it, and so it's no surprise, or it's kind of common knowledge at this point that there are different hand traps that are going to be more of a mainstay in the format. Most notably, Droll, Knockbird, and Ghost Ogre. Both of these two hand traps are pretty much essential to stopping the two upcoming meta decks in Super Heavy Samurai and Purely. Both decks are very, very strong, especially once they're set up. The end boards are in different ways very difficult to deal with. They put up a lot of interruptions. They back it up by having a lot of hand traps. You have different builds, so depending on the build, both Droll and Ghost Ogre might not be as impactful, but then you also see a different shift in other hand traps. Like Ash was a lot better in certain metas before. Imperm was sort of decent, but then in the next format, not going to be quite as good because the Stray Street helps protect all the Purelees. It's also not as good into Super Heavy Samurai since Imperm doesn't really quite hit some of the search cards. And so I think with that being said, though, everyone is also anticipating a ban list, but I think it's also important to consider what happens if we don't see a ban list. And then you have to take kind of this hybrid format of both the Photon Hypernova format, with Keshchira being kind of the deck to beat and something that you really have to respect. And then you throw in decks like Purely and Super Heavy Samurai, which uncontested are pretty strong decks, but if you still have to deal with a Rise Heart and a Birth, that could be pretty difficult to deal with.
True, thank you. So they're definitely really good insight, very important, because hand traps are going to be very important. I mean, just as important as they were last format. And moving forward, I'm sure they will continue to be basically important moving forward. So out of curiosity, basically same person, Toby, I want to ask you a question with regards, because there are some people who I know I've talked to with locals about a slaughter list, or basically a list that's basically just gonna kind of just reset the format. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the cards in the new set, or at least the archetypes that they support, are a little too strong to have a slaughter list. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of slaughter lists, unless those slaughter lists also include the new cards. Because as we saw with the Photon Hypernova meta, a lot of decks were pushed with the disappearance of tier elements. The deck was still a lot of fun to play. I tried to play it and tweak it, and it was fun. But against a single Arise Heart, a lot of times you just lose the game. And so it took so many hits to kill one deck in order to allow other decks to kind of start playing. But it also allowed Kashtira to basically just enter the meta with 0 hits whatsoever. And I think that doesn't necessarily lead to very interesting gameplay, personally. But if you look to metas as a result of a slaughter list, such as after the toss format, right? I think around 2020, when you lead to the next year, even though it wasn't necessarily an immediate impact, over time with that slaughter list and then minor adjustments and tweaks here and there with some new sets here and there, by the time you get to, I think, pre-Bode format, which is when I started playing after a long hiatus, you did see a very diverse meta that I think was pretty healthy, even though it still had some, degenerate decks here and there. But for the most part, it was very welcoming as a returning player to be able to play the game and not feel like you were completely hosed out of the game versus you look at Ishizu tier format or even Kashtira format. Initially, it was not very healthy or friendly for new players. So maybe a slaughter list is in order, but if the slaughter list, gets rid of everything that can contend with super heavy and purely, you may end up with a 3-deck format again, and I don't think that would be very. I mean, it could be interesting, but especially for the casual player base, there needs to be a balance between the competitive player base and the casual player base, and I think that the immediate impact might not be as healthy, but maybe long term it could do something.
You were saying you took a hiatus. You said pre-po. So how long have you been playing the game?
So I played as a kid, up until pretty much like I think the GX through the early 5Ds era was where I really played a lot as a kid, but I didn't have the money for a lot of cards, so
it was more casual.
Yeah, very, very casual.
Okay.
I had to wait till Gold Series to even afford any of the Lightsworn cards. And then, took a break for school and then came back right before Burst of Destiny dropped. And so started off playing Grand Maju and Heroes and then transitioned into some of the other decks.
Nice. So
Look at you
moving
now.
right along. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Ironic.
So moving right along though, Christian here, if I understand correctly, you are essentially a greenhorn to the game.
Pretty
you haven't
much.
been playing for very long. How long have you been playing?
I've been playing since October of 2021. October, September. So about a year and a half. It'll be 2 years this year.
Wow, okay, nice. So with regards to that, now since we got to hear, it's from someone, granted, I know Toby played a lot more casual during like earlier formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! What are your thoughts and opinions on a slaughter list, since you haven't really experienced anything prior to a couple years ago?
Honestly, so I gotta agree with Toby on a lot of things where just testing out the decks that are coming up, they feel very powerful. And if you kind of slaughter a lot of things, that I think you also have to take into the account of how far back you want to go on a slaughter list, right? Are we going back to like Sword Soul branded? Are we hitting a lot of branded and Sword Soul stuff? Are we hitting Kashtira, which could see a ban with Kashtira, but I doubt too much of a hit, like maybe Diablosis. But other than that, I don't see anything too major. But a slaughter list, I think you have to start out just going, how far back do we want to start this list? Because if you go back, like think of all the stuff that we have now that started off not being powerful because of the tier element meta. There was so many overshadowed decks. There was a lot of fun decks in there, but they were overshadowed just because once the Ishizu stuff came out, you had to play a Grave deck. If you didn't play a Grave deck that could go toe-to-toe with tier, you were out of there.
Absolutely.
So now we have these decks that are back in the format, sadly, because tier had to take the hit for that. So we have Labyrinth. We've got Punk. Yeah, I liked the deck. I will admit to that. I'm going to out myself right now. The most fun deck I've played as a baby to the game. I loved it. But you have like Labyrinth, you have Punk, you have all these other decks that are like showing back up now. And you really have to ask yourself, do these decks need to take the hit just so the future decks can just keep kind of running? And then you also have this weird middle ground where super heavy, the whole deck is basically common. You have one super in the main besides your hand traps. Prodigy's a super. The rest of the deck is all commons and like maybe one rare. And yeah, they're going up, but I think that's probably the most accessible a meta deck has currently been in my limited time of playing. So
keep in mind, they're going up. Sorry to interrupt, but they're going up.
Yeah,
we're getting a tin
I know
soon.
they are going
We're getting
up.
a tin soon, so we might get a reprint of cards that haven't been printed in
Exactly.
years.
So and they're
the
only
reason
going
why
up
they're
because
up
they're
is
so
we've
old.
only got
Exactly.
Printing, yeah.
But still, the thing is that an entire deck is basically just a bunch of commons. You know, at the end of the day, rather than like, okay, I need to get 3 copies of this $90 secret rare.
True.
So it's a weird thing of one of the decks that's meant to be the top contender is going to be not super, but pretty accessible. That also meets the fact of like a lot of decks that didn't get a chance to shine just because of tier format. So are we going back to right before tiers came out? Are we going back before this box set comes out? And there's just so many layers to it, I think. That it's.
You also got to remember, we're seeing a lot of new strategies now.
Yes,
because,
exactly.
For example, so people are always looking at OCG. It's like, what's great? What's strong? What's doing great? For one, OCG doesn't have something we have now, which is Gold Pride. And we're seeing strategies come out with
Punk Gold Pride because that is only here.
We don't know how strong that ceiling is for that deck because we've never seen it actually in action because it doesn't exist in Japan. It doesn't exist in the OCG.
But if you hit the Punk stuff, you hit a lot of turboing for the deck. Like, don't get me wrong, the deck probably doesn't need the Punk stuff, but at the end of the day, it is a very good fill-in for the deck.
It makes it a lot more
consistent. It lacks. Yes, exactly.
Starts it. It's the ignition. It's the key to the car. All jokes aside.
Just to jump on that real quickly, I
think
that you bring up a really good point too. Is there's a lot of decks that because of tier and Ishizu tier specifically were completely overshadowed, right? And I think Runic is the biggest offender of this. As soon as Ishizu tier got out of the metagame where you're not losing 10 cards per turn, where you don't have these shufflers interrupting your fountain draws, getting rid of your mole crickets, getting rid of the things that you want to be able to do things with, all of a sudden people are realizing, oh wait, this deck without the cards to properly interrupt it with actually does things. When you only have to play against one Medora and one Keldo, there's not a lot to fear, and you can just go off with your effects, and then you end on end boards with, Baronne de Fleur with the Naturia Beast, a Fountain, 3 Runic cards in hand. And you realize, oh wait, this is actually a really hard end board to deal with. Who knew that, just not having these shufflers and the millers in the game and getting rid of all of their resources actually did something, right? And same thing with these other decks too. Like Labyrinth was pretty much unplayable because it couldn't do anything to interrupt or interact with Ishizu tier elements. And then once it actually got the time to set up, was able to do things, and it was a really fun deck. Ironic to go 5-4 in the.
I feel like the lab matchup versus tier was sort of a coin toss matchup. It's like,
did I draw DDG or not?
Who set all their floodgates first?
Yeah, so you could do the slaughter list, but then you end up with this, and that's kind of what I think Sword Soul tried to do at the beginning of every new meta, once you hit tier, right, everyone's like, oh, you could play Sword Soul again. Because in a new meta, when people haven't figured out what other decks you can play, like the very, very beginning of post-tier ban list, everyone was like, oh my god, Sword Soul didn't get hit. And it's already like the de facto tier 1, tier 2 deck that everyone's going to be trying out until new strategies come forth. And I think that's something that's very underrated with Cyberstorm Access just dropping in a couple weeks and Duelist Nexus right around the corner. There's a lot of archetypes that gain a lot of support, and if you hit the direct competition without hitting things adjacent to these decks, it's going to be a big problem, and it's going to be a big old mess.
It could probably end up in another tier format where it's just these 2-to-1 decks are the only thing playable, and good luck trying to play something else.
There's a lot of decks that are just waiting to snatch that tier 1 to tier 0.5 spot, and without careful consideration, they'll just pop up out of nowhere.
And that's another thing. Going back to the Sword Soul, if you depending on how far you go back, you end up killing these safe decks, right? Like Toby said, tier got slaughtered. The first thing people did were jump on 2 decks. Sword Soul, people defaulted back to Sword Soul, and everyone was scrambling for their cash tier cards, right? So, and why? Because Sword Soul is beginner friendly and skilled player crazy.
Skill
I don't know.
dependent.
Yeah,
Skill dependent.
like it's got a low floor, you know. Anybody can do She Shall Barone set pass, you know. Not a hard thing, but yeah. But at the end of the day, depending on what hand traps and stuff you open, because that deck just has so many flex spots, that could be all you
Got
need
a lot
to break
of room
a board.
for non-engine, for
Exactly. That could be all you need to just hold somebody at bay and just take the game. 2 monsters and a set card, like 2009 Yu-Gi-Oh almost. But a good player can put like 3 to 4 bodies on board, still have like 4 cards in hand. You know, like it's crazy to watch a good person play Sword Soul on all these lines they can make. Like a new player, first time I tried that deck, somebody handed it to me. I looked at it, I went, I had like 3 tennies and like 2 spells in here. I was like, what the hell is this? I don't know what the heck to do
Normal
with this.
summon Moye.
Didn't even have
Right.
that. I was like, what do I do with this? And like, I look back on that now and I'm like, I had like a whole board I could have made, you know, like I could have ended on so much stuff. And I'm sitting here like, set this, I think set this,
Think what?
good to go. Yeah, exactly. Like but that's, you kill safe decks like that too, you know? And those are needed because they allow people to get into the game. Then they go, all right, where do we want to go from here?
No, very true.
Desmia.
Oh boy.
That was probably
Nice.
a bad choice on my end, but I like Fusion, so.
All right, so Forbes,
Howdy.
you've been in the game for quite a long time, and you're also currently a judge, yes?
Yeah, so I am a judge, and I've played since Spell Ruler, but I was a wee babby during that time. But when I really started playing was about the same time Toby played, which was like early GX to like the end of 5Ds. That's when I really started. That was like middle school, right? And I basically hiatus just like he did for a while, but I came back at around where I really started playing was I played a lot during Hat. I do remember playing a lot during Hat, and then sort of paused again, and then came back during pause format. And my dumbass was playing Karakuri. So I mean,
All right.
bad decks galore. It's kind of my shtick here. But yeah, so I am a judge. I met all you guys through judging, so just a heads up. I am the judge for the locals attend. Well, Christian not anymore because he went back home. We all miss him.
Peaced out.
All right. So, real quick though, with Forbes, since with regards to your long-term or your longevity in the game, what are your thoughts about having a slaughter list though?
So the thing with Slaughterless, and this is just my opinion, right? Of course, we're all giving our opinions here.
Absolutely.
But I think Slaughterless, for the most part, especially nowadays, unless it's a tier 0 format where it's clearly like, holy shit, there's no room for any other deck to play, I don't think a Slaughter list is necessary. and so, for example, let's just use like the current format, right? So we're gonna lean into the sort of YouTuber ban list predictions here. Like, if I was personally hitting the ban list, so things I personally we do our own little ban list at our locals. We do our own little for fun events. So it's basically Heart of the Underdog, right? But we add extra cards. When I look at cards in the format and think of what I need to hit or what we should be hitting, usually I'd be looking at the things that people are considering a problem. So, what's toxic about the format pre-Cyberstorm? Oh, it's the 9 board lock. What enables the 9 board lock? Well, for one, they have to play uninterrupted, which is very rare. Like, deck building issue if you don't stop them, right? Like, but what enables it? Diablosis. What does Diablosis need to enable it? 2 Shangri-Ira. So, basically, for me, I would be hitting one of those 2 things or both of those things to some degree. And going to this current format, right? Super Heavy Samurai, like everyone's like worried, oh, Super Heavy's gonna dominate the meta, or Purely's gonna dominate the meta. What keeps those in check? Both those decks don't do well under a macro. So if you don't want to hit Cash, because Cash is sort of a check to both of those decks. But, well, you want to hit Cash, but you don't want to hit it too hard, right? You want to leave it so it's fully playable. You just want to hit the toxic bits of it.
The problematic cards, essentially.
Exactly. Same theory for any deck, any ban list. Like, slaughter lists, usually I am not a proponent of, unless it's literally a format like Tier, where it's like, hey, Tier is shutting out literally every other deck that could possibly play. There's that thing with like slaughter lists, especially I honestly think our current format, for the most part, heading into Cyberstorm, is actually pretty healthy. Outside of very few things that I do think need to be hit. Like, there are things that are not going to hit that I personally think should be hit, like branded expulsion to a degree, or like what it enables, because for one, that forces players to run certain cards or do certain things. Of course, people can argue, oh, but every deck does something like that. But stuff like branded expulsion, giving someone like an Ibli or a not Gizmek Nightmare, Gimmick Puppet Nightmare. What was the other card? Raw Disciple, or Ido, the something, the thing that doesn't let you
I
summon.
think it's Supreme Being, something like that.
Something along those lines. But cards that dynamically, forcefully warp how the game is played, I am personally not a fan of, especially where it requires you to run things that you normally wouldn't run in a very limited resource spot. And the only card that I don't agree with the fact on that sort of theory, and this is going to be very controversial, I don't think Mystic Mine falls into that category of warping the game. And that's purely because you should have space for backer removal in your deck. Stop playing all gas. Says the guy who plays all gas. Stop playing all gas.
Hey, if we're going to talk about Mystic Mine, I can jump on this bandwagon. Okay.
We can go back to that in a bit, but for like basically like cards like now, like things I would like personally want to hit. Right, we're gonna go into like back into banlist YouTuber territory. Like Diablosis, I would hit because it enables the part of Cash that is the most toxic. Like I would either ban Diablosis or limit Shangri-Ira to 1. There you go. Now you don't have the problem of 9 lock. Like, that was the main thing that people hated about Cash, where, oh, my whole board is gone. I can no longer play the game. And that's something that shouldn't exist, right?
It's a different version of locking somebody out like
It's the
Tier.
same issue that happened back, not so much like Gumblar format, but around that when you get U-linked and then Iblied. Like, this still happens nowadays. It's like, Code
Yes,
Talkers.
it does.
It still happens with Code Talkers, as Michael knows very well. That's his favorite deck. Is it your favorite deck?
It is definitely one of my top favorites.
It's
a very fun deck. It's a very skillful deck. That's why I very much enjoy playing it.
The thing is, the decks, you can stop it now. And we're also, like, outside of Ibli, right? Like, you're not locked out of certain things. Like, would I want Ibli banned? Maybe? It's not something it's not something I'm set on. It's not something
I will definitely say, Forbes, that is an excellent segue, at least, to our next topic at hand.
Yeah, because
I actually did also want to, because that's what I was saying with regards to Mystic Mine and Ibli. Actually, those are two really good examples, because I wanted to talk about floodgates and the ban list. I mean, specifically for the TCG, I know a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players really don't like floodgate cards. Just cards that essentially, as soon as they flip up, it just kind of wins them the game. And it's always been an issue. I mean, I can definitely say one of the ones that I played through Dragon Ruler format, Necros format, being Vanity's Emptiness. which is a very, very strong card. That card, if that card flips and it resolves, it's game winning. It just ends.
Don't remind me of that card.
So, because I mean, I've been playing competitively in Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically, I first hopped in basically during Edison format. That was when I first started playing competitively, so around like 2009, 2010. And I've been playing essentially competitively ever since. So I've been playing for a very long time. I've gone through a lot of different ban lists that we've had. I've gone through ban lists that don't do anything. Then I've gone through slaughter lists, like Tengu Plant format is a really good example because what was it? I think it was
Dandelion. Entire Dandy engine basically got taken out.
The entire plant engine got hit. There was a lot of synchro monsters that got banned, and there was a lot of cards that got limited during that period because they just wanted, because Plant Synchro, it was one of those decks that it continued to evolve with each list and was still playable no matter what they did to try and hit the list to make it weaker. It just, people kept playing it and they found ways to continue making the deck strong. So eventually,
did they hit Tengu? I don't remember if they hit Reborn Tengu.
Yes, I don't know if it was during that list specifically, but I believe they hit it to 2. They semi-limited Tengu.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't remember if they hit Tengu or not, because that was what enabled a lot of the DJ stuff alongside Dandelion.
I did not agree with the Reborn Tengu hit. It's like,
I mean,
that would be like
enable these plays, but
I mean, the only reason for me too is like I can definitely say playing Tengu plants. There were always those lovely times where you open up 2 Reborn Tengu and gaming.
Yes. Even today, that still happens when I play the format.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so with regard, but anyways, back to the topic at hand though. Floodgates and the ban list. That is, I know, something that a lot of people, I mean, a big one that's been on everyone's in the back of everyone's head has been skill drain. Because since we do currently have skill drain at 3, it is still a very powerful card, and there are a couple decks that can actually utilize it. But yeah, I guess I'll go and start with you this time, Chris. What are your thoughts on Floodgates and the ban list?
I think so. When I first got into the game, couldn't freaking stand them at all. I was like, this is stupid. This dude literally just flipped one card. I'm like, okay, and I can't play. Cool. Literally started running back row hate in tier, which was not really a common thing, just for stuff like that. However, the more I play this game, Floodgates are so awkward when it comes to ban lists. Because you have to think about what they do, right? What they keep in check. Like skill drain. I don't run skill drain at all, but I was playing lab when tier got hit. I had to find a new deck. I was like, I got all the lab stuff. Let me try this. I wasn't running skill drain at all. I was running a more like combo heavy. I was doing furniture before furniture was cool. But then I sat down and really thought about my deck. And what did skill drain do for me? It brought the tempo of the game down to a manageable spot that I could level out for those decks that were just going way too fast for what I had in hand. It's like, okay, I have answers for all this stuff, but this is getting out of hand. If this continues going up, I'm about to go down. Flip skill drain, cool. Now we brought the speed of this game back down to a spot I can manage. However, though, I think what's inherently wrong with Floodgates is the way they a lot of times get used. Exhibit A, I know I'm probably going to get hate for this. Eldritch. Eldritch was flip 3 Floodgates, go ham with a 3500 beater for a turn or 2. That is so boring and toxic, right?
Eldritch was just called monkey flip .deck for a reason.
And at the end of the day, it's like, when it clicked for me that all I had to do is get rid of Eldritch and the deck kind of died, I stopped losing to it. Like, okay, you have 3 monsters in the whole deck. If that thing's not on the board and I can keep that off the field, I'm good to go. It was super easy. But in decks like that, it's just like, I'm just going to flip this and pray you can't get through it. Like, that feels so bad to play into. And I don't even want to imagine what it feels like to play the deck itself. That just feels so boring. So,
I mean, that
they're
was basically
good. I want to say Floodgates are in a I don't want to say good, but at the same time, they're like, it's understandable for some of them to be around.
Would you call them a painful necessity?
Yes. Some of them. There are some that inherently just too toxic that I feel like probably could get hit, but that's kind of my take on it, painful necessity, like Forbes said.
What do you about you, Toby? What are your thoughts?
I know he hates Shifter.
We can
Me
go
too.
off of that
Me too.
later. But I think that, like Christian said, floodgates are kind of like a necessary evil. They're there to bring the tempo of the game down. They're there to keep certain strategies and decks in check. For example, skill drain against a deck like Rika's. It's a strong deck. Rika Sun Avalon. It's a strong deck, but that deck has a really hard time dealing with skill drain. Without skill drain in the metagame, the deck does not have to respect it. They can build their deck differently. They can play their deck differently, and I think that playing the game in a way where you don't have to have any fear or consideration of what your opponent has is not necessarily compelling gameplay compared to when you always had to play around Mystic Mind. It was always in the back of your mind. You always had to consider, which end board do I go for? How do I play around the Mystic Mind? If I'm playing into the Mystic Mind, what is my out, right? People were literally ending on boards where they would bait their opponent into committing a monster and then getting rid of their monster in the end phase so that they lock their opponent under their own Mystic Mind, catch them off guard, and then turn around and win the game. I personally think Mystic Mind never deserved a ban, and as soon as Mystic Mind got banned, you saw what happened with the Shizu tier.
We gotta pivot back into just full wombo, big board
Exactly.
deck.
Well, the thing I'll add about mine is that the one thing I'll add about mine is that I don't like the card. I'm gonna just be straight up. I don't like the card, but
yeah, no, it's understandable.
But,
Don't get me wrong,
but I think it's mostly because it goes back to how floodgates can be a necessary evil, but what makes them toxic is how a lot of people will use them. Is that Mystic Mind was basically getting abused in a way like, I can now slap this on board while my opponent did such and such, or just flip Metaverse, or Demise of the Land, I think it was, the quick play spell that
or
if you special
nowadays,
summon.
New card, how did I get here?
Yeah.
That to Mystic Mind. And worse.
It's basically like
border.
Pretty much. So it's like you have that, and you have people building it's when you have people building their whole decks around these floodgates, right? Where it becomes a problem. Mine, you read that card like, this is powerful as shit. But at the end of the day, what is it? It's a pause button. It's a pause button for you to establish your board and the opponent. It's like Dark Ruler, but as long as I manage my resources to where I'm under what my opponent has, I can keep doing my own stuff and they can't respond at the moment. But it does allow interactability in the sense that, like, if the opponent has absolutely anything to check their board, like if you put two monsters on board and they have two, and they have some way instantly as that second monster hits the board to remove one of theirs, you're offline. You're offline. Like, that's you've got to somehow now recheck yours back down to the one and then play under that.
I mean, you can just dark hole the whole board and mine's gone.
You could.
That's another way to get rid of it.
Yeah. You
it's
could.
Soft, yes, but you can do it.
Yeah, it goes back to like how people use the cards is what I think. People drive the hate at the card itself, but it's like, why is the hate there? It's because somebody's abusing this card in a way that it wasn't meant to be abused when it got made. Like you read like I said, you read the card, it's a pause button at the end of the day. But it's a very powerful pause button.
It transitions really well into SIAC format too. When we look into the format that we're about to enter in 2 weeks, Droll and Lockbird is a very, very strong card. The fact that this card is seeing play in this next format tells you how strong and powerful the next decks and strategies are. So, like, the skill drain as a card goes in match, Rivalry of Warlords, there can be only one. These cards in and of themselves can be strong, depending on what the rest of the meta is looking like, right? There's metas where skill drain is a weak card. That's why the card came back, because it wasn't necessarily deemed as much of a problem as it used to be. Same thing with the other cards, where honestly, depending on how the meta shapes up, you could see them getting a hit. But what happens when you hit these floodgates, right? You hit rivalries, then all these other decks that use multiple monster types will become way more prevalent because they get to do all of that and lock their opponent under a floodgate. Like there can be only. Same thing with decks that use only one attribute. If you hit goes in match, then decks that only use one attribute, like let's say fish control or shark control, whatever you want to call it, uni control, like those decks become a lot weaker because they lose something that allows them to slow down the tempo of the game. Now, when you look at a card like Droll and Lockbird, the fact that this card is creeping into the meta again, and you can see it from even the market, the way that it's moving on TCG Player, Droll and Lockbird, I think, is $200 and climbing card now for the ultimate rare, and I think all other copies are like $2 to $5 plus.
Yeah, I think even the rare is like $2 right now.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
It's
and
insane,
also
right?
to clarify, like with regards to Droll and Lock, like a lot of people have been citing Droll and Lock for a long time. It's the fact that it's now officially in the main board. It's in the main deck. Everyone is maining it.
Necessary because you need it in game one, and the fact that it's not incorrect. Like in other metas, if you main deck Droll and Lockbird, your opponent laughed at you because they did the one search that mattered, and now you went neg one to do nothing. They're not searching anymore for the rest of the turn. But the fact that Droll and Lockbird is necessary to prevent your opponent from playing the game at all, it is a floodgate, right? You're stopping your opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
You can't search anymore.
And it's to buy yourself a turn. It's completely necessary because Super Heavy Samurai plays through all the other hand traps like crazy. I watched someone get Nibiru'd and still end on he still ended on a Baron plus a Regulus and a set. I was like,
it's insane. Yeah,
his end board without the Appaloosa. It's the same thing.
I mean, that's also just Konami in the past forgetting to put once per turn effect clauses on cards. But
and then they keep forgetting.
I can segue to that a bit.
Yeah.
Oh god, don't get me started on that. But
it's just crazy. And so like these cards, so long as there exists or continue to exist, cards and decks that encourage such degeneracy, you need these cards in the metagame to kind of keep things in check a little bit and prevent them from spiraling out of control. And going first is already very strong in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's only gotten stronger over time. They even had to nerf the draw at the start of your turn, right? Because that was
Oh god, could you imagine today starting with 6 in hand?
I would actually still see the Nibiru.
Floodgates on the ban list. It's a weird thought, right? Because floodgates are hand traps. They are a consequence of the way the game has evolved. It's become sort of a thing where it's like, if floodgates didn't exist, every format would be break my board the format, right? That would be a thing. And also the thing about floodgates, like, yes, it's coin flip. I want them to make more floodgate type cards that work like Shifter, but only for one turn, if that makes sense. Skill Drain for one turn, goes in for one turn. Like cards like hand traps that you pitch from your hand, they still minus you, but they will sort of slow the game down for that turn to sort of buy you breath.
Kind of similar to like Dimensional Barrier, correct?
Yes, barrier, but like as a hand trap.
To wrap up that last topic, I'm assuming we can at least all agree that floodgates are a necessary evil. Yes.
Unfortunately, yes. It sucks to be hit with there could be only one goes in and rivalry at the same time, but they're kind of there for a reason.
Come on, Jeff. I know you want to.
Give us back Heavy Storm. Just one. Give us one Heavy Storm.
I have many reasons to, at least. We're not going to go into it at the moment. This could be left for a discussion for another day. But I do have my reasons why I do not believe Heavy Storm should come back. But again, discussion for another day. So moving on to the next topic. We do have a lot of hand traps, and contrary to the OCG list, they have addressed hand traps. Do you believe that is something that the TCG may need at some point, at a given point? I'll have you start, Forbes. What do you think?
I say no, and the only reason why I'll say this is because very key differences between OCG and TCG. For one, the players play more controlled, and there's a reason for that. The one card that exists that they have that we don't have is Max C. And it's a weird caveat because everyone who's played older formats knows Max C is a very much polarizing card. Even today, everyone's like, "Oh, it can come back. No, it can't come back. Oh, it can come back. It can't come back." But the thing is, like, OCG putting their hand traps to 2, I feel is part of because it's literally because Max C exists. Because if every hand trap was at 3 at OCG and they have Max C, the odds of them drawing into that hand trap rises exponentially. Versus here, where we don't have Max C, we might not open the out. But, like, say an OCG player, oh, I went second, but I have Max C in my hand, and I don't have a hand trap. Let me send Max C, and if my opponent doesn't stop me, who knows? I may draw the out. I could draw the out. Like, oh, I could draw Lava Golem, I could draw the Lightning Storm, I could draw the Ash, I could draw the Droll, etc., etc., etc. Well, here, we don't have Max C, so you, as a result, you have this situation where it's like, I can't draw the out during your turn. So having the Ivory Trap at 3 is a more reasonable thought. I like control decks, right? But there hasn't been really a control deck that actually worked as a control deck versus back rewinding a little bit that evolved into just flip floodgate and hope to God you stop. Right?
I think you have to be really careful with that, though.
You 100% have to, right?
Yeah.
But
because like lingering effects in I think the history of Yu-Gi-Oh, as far as I'm aware, have all been very strong and pretty much meta-defining.
Toby, I did actually kind of like where you were going with that, though, with regards to lingering effects. Because 2 lingering effects that are very strong currently in the format that I can think of would be, one is Dimension Shifter, and another being Shangri-Ira's Zone Blocking effect.
Also Droll, because it may only be for one turn,
and Droll and Lock as well, correct.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? So I guess you want to continue going on that, Toby.
Yeah, I personally absolutely hate them. I like the art of Droll and Lockbird. I hate everything that it does and everything that it stands for. I also hate everything that Dimensional Shifter stands for. I also absolutely dislike Shangri-Ira. The fact that it continues to lock zones under a skill drain or an imperm is absolutely insane to me. Or maybe not imperm. But anyways, you get the point.
No,
right?
it's
like,
under...
Yeah.
Yeah, like the fact that these effects linger and you have to specifically deal with them in very direct ways, right? Like, for the longest time, anytime I played a deck that cared about the graveyard, I would side deck or even main deck three Cyframe Gear Gammas with a called by specifically to hit Shifter and praying that I was able to draw one of those 4 cards in the top 5 of my 40 and be able to play the game. If I was playing a deck that cared about Droll that much, I would probably do just about the same thing. You see Super Heavy Samurai doing it right now, where they're main decking Gammas because, getting hit by a Droll, their end board is a Bagooska, and if it gets outed, they lose the game on the spot. And then you have to pray and hope you drew other hand traps. I think that all of these lingering effects that if you don't have the answer to them, completely basically push someone out of playing the game aren't necessarily healthy. But to play devil's advocate, creating decks and archetypes that force you into using these cards and considering or even having it be strongly encouraged to main deck them is also not the solution either, right? Like, let's not make these very niche but powerful cards any stronger than they already are, right? There's metas where, like when Kashtira becomes the strongest deck in the meta, no one's playing D-Shifter in the main because you drop a D-Shifter, your opponent's on Kashtira, thanks. You just allow them to go full combo without using any of their, specific extension effects, and they just did everything for free. Versus in tier format where people were not only main decking Shifters, they were also playing, 9 Bestials just to deal with those cards, which is another form of warping the meta, right? I think that it's a very difficult balance to maintain, but creating more cards that have these sort of lingering effects, and then at the same time creating new cards that encourage the use of these lingering effects results in very unhealthy gameplay where you pray and hope your opponent doesn't have it, or playing against an opponent where you need these high impact cards, you pray and hope that you draw it, and if not, you're getting full combo to the moon, and now you're staring down Baron de Fleur, Borreload Savage, Regulus, and a 3 to 4 mana Appaloosa. Good luck if you didn't draw the board breaker, you're cooked. I don't think that necessarily is a type of Yu-Gi-Oh that's very inviting for people to play, because you could just sit there watching your opponent play Solitaire for 20 minutes and you didn't draw something that mattered. Like, if you're just sitting with a single Ogre, it doesn't do a whole lot versus having Ogre Ash or Ogre Droll, then you're sitting pretty. It's very scary to think of.
It's also like
this as the new meta and new Yu-Gi-Oh.
It also goes vice versa, I would think. It's I spent this time setting up what I thought was the unbreakable board, right? Like, I made this board to try and out anything my opponent might play. And it's like, all right, here's Lava Golem. All my work just went out the window. I spent 20 minutes for nothing. Sphere mode, Lava Golem, Turtle, like, I just spent all that time and making sure I did my plays properly just for my opponent to just say, here, now I'm gonna do it back to you.
I mean, or there's always the iconic standby main battle phase.
Yeah.
I think that these cards are healthy in terms of, like, it in a vacuum. It's healthy to have these cards existing so that you force players to have to consider them when they play the game and play around them, right? I think Nibiru is another one of those very polarizing hand traps where there's metas where it's strong and there's metas where it's very weak. We saw that with the Photon Hypernova meta, where at the very beginning, when everyone's going wide with these large boards that play, 5, 6, 8 summons deep to try to lock your whole board.
Nibiru went through a very interesting time period during Photon Hypernova. It was just, there were times where everyone was playing it. Everybody and their mother was playing it, or nobody was playing it. And it just kept going back and forth. It never truly defined itself throughout the format. It was just like, 1 week, no one would play it at an event, but then 1 week, everyone would be playing it at an event.
Yeah.
And that's healthy, right? Because it forces you to play around it, right? If your opponent is ending on 4 summons with their board, you just have a dead card. You're playing with 1 less card in hand. However, if your opponent extends into it and you're able to punish them, it could be very rewarding. The problem that we're entering now is super heavy plays through Nib like nothing.
It really does. It doesn't matter.
Nib like nothing. If they play into the Nib, you nib them because you're forced to on the plump. They get 3 cards back and they summon 1 back from grave and they do everything.
They just do it again.
All over again. They still end on Nor. Now you have 1 less card. Oh, by the way, they also have a token. Thanks for tributing their board. They still add an extra monster.
Now they just have a giant rock.
Beater.
And so
looking at you.
Nibiru as a hand trap is a healthy card.
Oh,
Shifter
100%.
and Droll, I completely disagree with those cards existing.
I think
in the capacity that they do. Like,
I think the only
there's no play around. You can't play around those cards. Really.
except called by, but it's not one. It's it goes out to the argument should call by.
Absolutely.
But I think the thing with Nib, and this is my thoughts because I run events, I see a lot of people play decks, right? Nib existing, unfortunately, shuts out a lot of rogue decks. And while I do get they are rogue for a reason, right? Nib, unfortunately, also becomes a sort of card. Can your deck play through Nib? That becomes that sort of same issue of, can your deck survive Dark Reward evenly? Can your deck survive a Sphere mode? And that becomes that sort of issue where when Konami's designing these decks, they look fun and like really fun to play, but then you realize, oh, it just loses to a giant rock.
I think those are...
It's few and far between nowadays. I feel like Konami's being a little better with this nowadays. They're making a lot more decks that kind of can just ignore it. But they're also making decks that do get punished by it, and it's usually the decks that end up being really strong, right? It's just Super Heavy's a weird sort of outlier because it's an older archetype. There's a lot of cards that don't have once per turn clauses, which results in just, oh, you got rocked me. Okay, let me just do it again, like, because it's not once per turn. I'll just do it again, right? But it also restricts a lot of decks that could be fun if Nib didn't exist. It's that weird sort of situation of like the card being a necessary evil again, like floodgates. Like Nib in the format, great. But at the same time, oh no, I can't play funny deck. I can't play something. It's that weird sort of like weird
You just gotta
balance.
pray that they don't have it.
Exactly. You're just like, don't have the rock. Let me go full combo. But then
Yeah, and if that's the only thing stopping your deck, I mean, you're sitting on a pretty good. You're sitting on a pretty good road deck if the only thing stopping you is a nib. But
I mean, the deck I played pre-Shizu was kind of that thing. Like, oh, you don't have nib. All right, let me make this board that you literally cannot.
yeah,
But that's the thing though, right? Like you do
nib's that
have
check.
you have inherent counterplay to nib. Your end board might not be as strong, but if you're reading nib, you just have to look and accept that you either have to make a decision where
I'm gonna
play
risk
into
my
nib,
board.
Yeah, and your opponent has it. And if they have it, they had it because you weren't winning if you were playing under 4 summons anyways.
Yeah,
Or you make the decision, I'm gonna play under 4 summons because I respect that my opponent has Nibiru.
Yeah,
But that type of like even having that conversation, I think, is healthy for any card game. Versus, I'm just gonna do my thing. If you have Droll, well, that sucks. Or I'm gonna commit to a play. Oh shoot, I got shifted. Well, just plan B. That's the only thing you can do. There's no consideration of if my opponent has shifter, this is the play I'm gonna do because it's either they have it or they don't. Same thing with Droll. Same thing with.
That's kind of feel like how it is essentially with any hand trap, right? It's like they either have it or they don't, and if it interrupts your play, you just have to be able to either play through it or just unfortunately.
But the thing is, you can check for Ash, right? You can check for Valor. You can check for Ogre. You can check for.
You have bait cards for stuff like that. You can be like response, and your opponent might go, let me think. And if they're thinking, you're like, okay, they might have something for this. They could be baiting you back.
Yep. Let me just bait this Droll and Lockbird. Oh, I did get Drolled. Well, shit.
Well, damn.
Let me do my. Oh wait, I can't.
Let me try baiting the shifter.
I was checking if you hit to see if you had Droll. Sure, you had it.
Shifter, I knew it. I was baiting it out. I knew you had it.
I knew you had it.
I'm gonna summon my Sharon now.
Yeah.
It's like joke's on you. I wasn't planning to search anymore.
Idiot.
On that topic, it is interesting to see.
This road I added? No.
This is a weird take. Cash, if not for the zone locks, would have been a very healthy deck because it is a prime example of a mid-range, not sort of control deck. Like, does it
minus Diabolosis? Because and that's the problem with Diabolosis.
You take Diabolosis out, the deck is so much better.
You do not play the game. You do not play the game. You lose 2 extra. You lose your extra deck monster. You lose like what 4. No,
you literally go from losing 3 cards to losing 20 cards, and you're just like,
And not just that, but it forces you into building your extra deck in an extremely specific way.
Yeah,
right?
You have to run 2 of everything important.
Yeah, 2 to 3, depending on.
Yeah,
and that feels bad too. It's like I don't have these flex spots in my extra deck anymore too, just because I have to pick and choose my battles because I know Diablosis exists. Like Diablosis is a prime example of an actually toxic card. You know. Like
your opponent today literally looked at my extra deck and said, "Which one is your one of? I'm gonna banish that." Didn't read any of my cards. Just said, "Yep, that one."
That one. It's just
because you just don't have it.
Because if you look at Cash, like when Cash players are scared of Nib, right? If we talk about it, like when we condense it down to like the bare bones of it, they end on a Rise Heart pass, like a Rise Heart with like 2 sets. The thing is, that by itself is already quite a strong board. It's a strong
because they can also end with 1 to 2 hand traps in hand as well.
Hand trap sets like Cash. If Shangri-Era did something else entirely, and if Diablosis didn't exist, would be a very healthy deck to exist in the format because of the way it plays. The only thing that kind of sucks is the way how Fenrir banish cards off the top of your deck, and if your deck plays 1-ofs, then you're kind of like, well, he hit my 1-of, I am now doomed. But like, besides that sort of factor, the deck for the most part is actually not that problematic. It's just those few individual things that do things that are bad. And like, I want to see more decks like that, but just Konami sort of taking a pause button when they kind of go crazy and go, maybe we dial this back a little. Let's keep it mid-range and not add this completely unnecessary
your bird brain deck, Toby. I refuse.
Like I say, Exosister, great mid-range deck. Like, it ends on Magnifica and 2 sets pass, and like, yeah, it sucks to play into, but like the deck itself fundamentally is a fairly healthy designed deck in a sense. It's a nice
fair
mid-range
deck.
sort of control deck. It's a fair
Unless
deck, yeah.
it's Michael, then he'll always have the shifter in the market.
Then Michael always
Hey,
have shifter.
hey.
But yeah,
Not
Michael
always,
opening
not
shifter, Tim opening evenly,
Vivek
Vivek
top
opening
decking the tactics.
Yes.
Hey,
Oh,
Tim learned evenly from me. Vivek just stacks tactics and alpha on the top of it.
Why
Vivek
can't
just
I have a stuck
always
card?
top
Why can't I?
decking
You know
cards.
what stuck to my hand? Lovely.
Oh God.
I
What's
will.
the
I
plan?
will
It
say
makes
the
your
best
box.
part is when Michael shifters you and you ask him to show you the Martha and he says, "You don't know if I have it. I
Yes, I
might
do.
not have it." Goes main phase, activate packs. Okay, he still had it every time.
You can ash the packs. There's no guarantee there's a Martha bean in my hand by the
Response?
time it resolves. Exactly. I gave you a chance. That's you. That's on you because you didn't draw it. Okay.
I should have just drawn the out. My bad, bro.
Exactly.
But like that
but
kind of
speaking,
aside, it's just mid-range is nice.
yeah. But so reeling back in, going back to hand traps though. With regards to hand traps being on the ban list, because I mean, I think currently one of the only ones I can really think of course, is just Maxi that we have it banned.
Right.
I mean,
Kind
are
of
the
counts? Sort
yeah.
of.
Do you? I mean, I guess Toby. I guess I'll just go ahead and start with you. Do you believe that there are hand traps in our format that you think could be, I guess, put in check?
I hate the card. I don't think that any of the hand traps in the meta right now will ever see a ban because Konami continues to print cards and support archetypes where these cards are going to be necessary. And so long as Tier Elements is a deck, so long as decks similar to Tier Elements in the way that it operates are going to be decks like Runic, right? You need cards like Dimensional Shifter to buy you a turn. I absolutely hate the card. I will die on this hill, but it's unfortunately a necessary evil, right? When you play a deck like Gren Maju in Drytron format, you need D-Shifter not only to fuel your own engine, but also to stop
Slow
your
them
opponent
down.
from playing and then try to OTK, right? And so it's a tool for a lot of these weaker decks that can afford to play it to be able to compete with these other decks that unchecked are extremely strong. Same thing with Droll and Lockbird. We saw metas where Droll and Lockbird was a card that was completely dead in your hand.
Oh, it's been dead for
one
like
turn. Yeah,
how
it's been
many
dead for
years
a
has it been
really
dead?
long time. It's been
Like-
dead for a really long time.
it was like dead after. It's been like not as played after Toss, right? Was it? Did it come out in Toss? I can't remember when it came out.
Well, to be totally fair, Droll and Lockbird came out in Starblast Strike as a rare way back in 5D's era. Just nobody ever used it because it was never relevant.
And
But
then
you
all of
weren't
a sudden,
searching 50 times a turn,
Yeah.
right? But because
Correct.
you're
The
pushing
game has
these
evolved.
archetypes, you're pushing these archetypes where even Kashtira getting drolled can really get hurt, right? Before they get
it
to
warps the
start
game.
setting up, they change and again, there's no play around. It warps the way you have to play. It warps the way you have to construct your deck, and at the same time, it also doesn't because if you want to play a certain deck, you're gonna have to accept you will lose to Droll. If you get Drolled, there is no counterplay. You just have to find a backup plan, right? You make a Bagunica.
Yeah.
You
Or you
pray
bite the bullet.
that it's enough. And so I honestly don't think I'll ever see any of these hand traps being hit with the way that the TCG continues to push combo decks. And they push those combo decks hard, right? I like coming back to the game with Vote format, I think DPE Turbo was the deck,
God.
right? You saw a lot of people playing Ashes and Veilers and Imperms, like playing a lot of these pile decks that basically ended on DPE, try to control the game and slow your opponent with a bunch of hand traps. And then you move on to what
Branded.
after that was like Branded started becoming a deck, and then Ash Blossom really was already a solid hand trap, but it really became an absolute staple, right? Because a single Branded fusion did so much for the deck to where you have to play a card like Ash. But if you can't just ban Ash because every deck is playing 3 Ash and it's mandatory, because then Branded just takes it
It
and
goes
runs
unchecked.
with it.
It goes
and then
unchecked.
after branded, you go back to what was after that? Before Ishizu tier, there was some other stuff, right? Other random things with Daifo came out, and it was just
Sprite.
kind of
Was it Sprite?
No, before Sprite. This was like adventure. It was just base format, right?
It was based, yeah.
That deck, unchecked, did so much, and so you need cards. Kind of like I don't remember if Shifter was that amazing, but it probably did things to the deck because it stopped souls, it stopped like the
it
Brave
groundhogged
Engine
a few
from being
times. It
that good.
popped its head out, and it was occasionally useful.
Yeah, and so like in these certain metas, like these hand traps rotate in and out. So the best thing that Konami can do, rather than banning hand traps, because as soon as you ban certain hand traps, other decks will creep right back into the meta. Like if Tier Elements in its current state doesn't have to worry about a Macrocosmos on a stick or Macrocosmos in the hand, it's still a legitimately strong deck, as we have established time and time again.
Correct. But what about
also
other than just banning though the hand traps though? But like for example, for like let's just like one that I know I've talked about with people at locals is Ash Blossom. What about even just limiting or semi-limiting this hand trap? Like, do you think that would be healthier for the format? Because like I said, in contrary to also like the OCG, like granted I don't agree with this hit, but like for example, they have Gamma at 1. Like they have other hand traps that are actually on the like either on the limited or semi-limited to try and help I guess to help control the format, but granted they also have a lot more cards hit on their end. And so, but the thing is there's a lot of decks that we have even currently in the meta where it has like a couple decks off the top of my head I can think of, Pearly is one of them, super heavy coming into the next format. Kashtira is essentially one of those as well, where they have a lot of flex space for non-engine cards, which gives them a lot of room for hand traps. And it's just like, if you have the hand trap, there are times where if you open up just 2 specific hand traps, you can just win the game. And so what I'm asking is, do you believe that there are certain hand traps that may need to end up somewhere on the list, not specifically just be banned, to basically kind of help keep certain either these certain cards or even certain decks in check?
Still don't think so. The biggest difference that we say time and time again is the OCG has Maxi. Just the simple existence of a card like Maxi warps the format. The whole tempo of the OCG format is so much slower, to the point where these hand traps stopping your opponent, here and there, can be very impactful. But in the TCG, it's mandatory. It's so fast here, you have to stifle your opponent, because if your opponent gets the turn to run rampant, you pretty much lose on the spot half the time, unless you have specifically certain board breakers, right? Like Kurakara is a very strong card, I think, still, even against non-Kashtira decks, because it allows you to get rid of a lot of things and gain value and possibly win the game from just the one card. So I think, like, as soon as you start hitting certain hand traps, the decks that those hand traps kept in check will creep right back into the meta unchecked. Like if Nibiru ever saw a hit to 2 or 1, no one ever has to respect it anymore. And then
you'll see a lot more rogue decks.
Yeah, you will, but at the same time, the decks that were not rogue, right? And I'm talking like your tier 2 decks that were only tier 2 because as long as the tier 1 decks had Nibiru, they were never losing to those decks. Those tier 2 decks become tier 1, and whatever was tier 1 that got kept in check could possibly become tier 0. And so, as long as the TCG format operates in the way that it does, I think hand traps are just going to be a necessary evil. And they float in and out of formats. We've seen formats where Nib is great and formats where Nib is bad. We've seen formats where Baylor, Ash, Imper, every single hand trap has pretty much been through a cycle in the past couple of years, as far as I've seen them.
Except Winter Cherries.
It don't have its day. It don't have it. It'll
also
it's so good, but
I don't know. It's niche, but I feel like it's gonna mark me now.
I do have a few points I want to interject on what Toby said. That thing about him saying like you have to accept that you're just gonna get droll or a hand trap. Like you either do that or you bite the bullet and commit 2 to 3 spots to cross out Dexinator and called by, right? Like
Unless
There
it's
are
a rare.
answers. It's just they unfortunately sort of throw a wrench in your otherwise well-oiled combo machine. And I'm gonna be honest, TCG players don't like that. Like, there is a running gag that TCG players treat Yu-Gi-Oh like solitaire. They like to combo. They don't like having a wrench in their combo. Like, that's why they hate hand traps. They hate flip. They don't want back or that kind of thing. It's also that other thing, and this is not on that topic. This is the thing about the hand traps being banned. This is something I've always felt, and this is me talking from a design standpoint. Hand traps being the way they are allow Konami to keep making these fun, crazy art. Because as much as I dislike the way certain archetypes are, like, I personally still think the Ishizu cards are a mistake. Tier was completely fine until Ishizu came out. Then we were just like, well, damn it. Like, it's that sort of thing where I wish Konami would have a bit more foresight, but at the same time, they have the hindsight to know, oh, X, Y, and Z hand trap exist, thus we can make this deck this crazy. Because people have the answers and have the checks. Hirishizu is just sort of like, if I'm going to use that example, that is an example of me just sort of completely forgetting that, like, we just made a deck that completely pluses off milling 5. And let's not make a hand trap that directly stops that, or let's make bestials, which...
What do you mean they're shifter?
Well, we're not going to talk... Oh boy, let's use this one hand trap that... but like...
Turns the deck off?
If you have it...
What does Droll do right now?
But you got to remember, the key word is if you have it. If the only hand trap you have that could stop tier is shifter, that means there's only one check versus a 40-card deck with like...
Droll always has it.
Like 24 cards that do the exact thing. We'll always have it, even if you don't have shifter, right?
Droll,
Like Konami has that sort of situation. Like, I won't say that hand traps are a perfect answer to every problem Yu-Gi-Oh has. It's just the fact that they exist allow Konami to create and innovate and make these interesting archetypes that we all enjoy.
Yeah.
Because they know now that there are those stoppers that exist and there's enough stoppers that exist, we can go a little hog. It's just that sort of thing with like Tira, for example, where the board lock is like, if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't, right? There's almost zero situation where they should be allowed to get to that point, because if you built your deck right, you have at least 3, 4, 9 ways to like stop them from getting to that point. Like, Tear Lament was that outlier because the answer that they made for Tear Lament could still run. So you ended up with a situation where it's Tear Lament versus Tear Lament with the exact same outs. Bestials. That was their sort of like pseudo answer.
I remember putting shifter in my deck. Was that
right? Also,
idiot. Shifter.
The hand trap we didn't even need.
Also,
I'm gonna beat you down with Rhino Heart. You're not getting. You're gonna
like
take
a lingering floodgate effect we were talked about, like a Beast Dweller. Like, Heart existed, but Tyr could make it. So,
all right.
Yeah,
I've been seeing. All right, Chris. I've been seeing you over there looking like you just wanted to jump into this cesspool of amazing topic of hand traps and on the list. So I want to hear your thoughts on this.
I don't know how much proper thoughts I'm gonna have given my limited experience, but I will say,
come on, Greenhorn, give me your thoughts. I want to know how bad.
One core thing that you said, like, about checking hand traps. Because you said, like, one of the things you said about it was Kashtira has all these flex spots, right, for hand traps. If you put hand traps to 1, 2, all you're doing is just creating more flex spots. At the end of the day, that's the most blatant answer. Like, oh, Ash is to 2. Okay, I can run an extra one of these and an extra one of these, and oh, I'll take this too. You know, like, I no longer have to run these one-ofs in my side deck when I can just slap them to just take space up in my main deck, and now my side deck is even more flexible as well.
Ash up into 2. Let me put this one shifter in.
Exactly. Or, hey, you know, this Harpy's Feather Duster I keep in the side deck because I really don't have space for it in my main. Just, all right, now what can I put here?
Please don't ever put Duster in your main. Oh, good God.
I'm gonna do it now just for that.
Just
Never
for
do
another
it.
day,
Never
Toby. We'll
do it unless it's a very back-row heavy format. Then you can
We'll-
consider it.
We'll have Duster we'll have back row
Yes,
removal in
please
the
don't
main
put
deck as
Duster in
another
your main. This
topic.
is coming from a
Oh my
Labyrinth
God.
player. Do not do that.
Oh my God.
I got Dustered in the main, and I just laughed because I still won. It was great.
I'm gonna say
So,
one thing on that, and then go back to the question, bro. I got Monster Reborn in the main. I don't want to hear it.
Oh God.
Yes, you heard
Avoid
that correct.
Any monster, dude. It's broken.
Monster Reborn in the main. I was in awe, and I lost because of it.
Should I side the Monster Reborn instead?
Oh
No,
my
the main
God.
deck can clearly see.
Actually,
You
to the
bring
two,
back.
you just made
Look!
that
Look!
go
What you
A.
do? You shifter, right? Monster Reborn, bring shifter back, shifter again, just to do a statement.
Yo,
Just to
that's
show
actually
you-
not a bad idea. Maybe
Just to
I will
show you I can do it again, you fucker here.
I am making a point.
Yeah.
Don't tell
Right.
Michael. He's gonna Monster Reborn
Oh,
in his
no.
Exo Sister deck.
If you
so
do,
can
somebody
double
please
check
record it for me. But yeah, also writing off of what Toby said, I feel like hand traps are a necessary thing. Besides a very small handful of them, pun intended, they're fair. You know, Ash is a one-time, except for the one case of Branded Fusion. Ash Branded Fusion, the deck's turned off, right? But at the end of the day, Ash is fair. It stops one search, send, or special from the deck. Most decks can play through that, right? Like, normal summon Yaman, pay 600. Oh, you ashed me? Anyways, here's E-Telly. I'm still
So
online and good to go.
And the thing is, if your deck dies to one hand trap, then why aren't you running Called By? Why aren't you running Cross Up?
Yeah.
At that
Or at
point,
least
you
why are
have
you
to
not going
realize-
into that scenario thinking, okay, if they have the one thing that stops my deck, how do I play around that from here? Can this hand, if I get, like, if you're sitting on a branded hand, you go, if I get ashed here, what is my plays going forward? You know, like, what is my board going to look like? It might not look like what I want it to, but if I get hit here and it turns off my stuff, what am I doing from here?
It's also that thing, right? Branded, back to the example. If you have Aliber and Branded Fusion, why would you activate Branded Fusion first?
Yeah.
You would try to bait out the Ash using Aliber, right?
Which, I
But
mean,
I've seen so many players just go, oh, Branded Fusion? Ash? Okay, normal summon Aliber? I just look at them like,
I guess that you could do the
Why?
one argument of, like, now you can
said
at least
branded in red,
grab,
but-
yeah, or branded in white, one of the two. So you're like, okay, I can have plays still.
You
Their Ash is
could, but-
gone.
the ideal scenario would be to do it the other way, right? You would want to bait
It
out
depends,
the Ash.
because Branded Fusion is a lot better of an Ash bait, I feel like, just because most people are going to see the Aluber and they're going to think, it's only going to go one of two ways. They're going to go grab Branded Loss, which tells me they have Branded Fusion in hand, or they're going to grab Branded Fusion, which tells me they need it in hand. Either way, Ash hits that, because Branded Loss doesn't protect you from Ash for Branded
it's
Fusion.
not.
Back to the hand traps and all of that. I think it's gonna be very interesting to see where Konami actually wants the format to develop, right? Like, we've talked about the evolution of different ban lists, from slaughter lists to lists where, like Michael said, where lists that just simply didn't do enough, and you're stuck with the same format again for another couple of months. And I think
Toss.
they kind of did that with the Ishizu tier ban list, where, or I think Sprite's a good example.
Oh, yeah,
They've
that deck's still
continued to
around.
hit Sprite, and it just keeps on evolving. That deck,
But
just
they mostly
simply
hit the
doesn't
Toad
go
stuff,
away.
wasn't it? Like, that was kind of all.
No, they
like,
hit
just...
Elf.
They
So
hit
Yeah,
the
but
thing
that's just
is,
because
they
Elf
finally
itself
banned
was
Elf.
just insane. Like, that
The
wasn't
thing
a
is, honestly, at
that
that
wasn't
point,
a
it wasn't
ban
even-
targeted at Sprite. That was just a ban targeted at Elf specifically. Like, that card.
Correct. Yeah, because Elf
Is
Elf is
just-
just extremely generic. All they required was any two monsters, and one of them had to be like a
level
rank
or link two. Yeah, it's like,
Elf-
that's insane. Like,
Elf
that's so
had
easy to
the-
make.
Elf had the Halka Fibrax problem.
Yeah,
Where it was
too
so generic, but did
Yes.
so much.
Correct,
I personally still to this day wish Hulk didn't get banned, but I can't see why. It's just that weird. Yeah, it's just that weird argument of people going, "Oh, Hulk limits synchro innovation." I'm like, what? Like synchro from deck? That should never be a thing. Like, I'm already like not a fan of fusion from Why would I want synchro?
Hey, I mean, to be totally
What do you
fair,
mean Blackwings
I mean,
does it? They literally synchro from deck.
Yeah, but Blackwings locks you into Blackwings.
Yeah, does it the proper way.
Back to the ban list. I think that like for the most part, Konami's headed in a direction where again banning cards like Dagda or not Dagda Scythe, banning cards like Hockey Fibrax, banning cards like Elf. They're trying to eliminate generic degenerate gameplay, right? Cards and engines that can be splashed into just about any deck that you can consistently and repeatedly provide the same end board, right? Like the Hulk end board with base was extremely consistent. It ate through 2, 3, sometimes even 4 hand traps like it was nothing, and still ended on the same stuff, right? And had protection afterwards. And so it'll be very interesting to see which direction they head. Right? Are they going to go the slaughterless route? Are they going to give everything a slap on the wrist? Because as it is right now, when you see the videos of people testing Syac format, the new decks are still able to contend with the meta decks right now, no problem.
Incredibly well too.
Yeah, or even excelling at it. And the only thing that like is on the horizon is none of the new decks are really on the chopping block, because they're not at the level of emergency ban list good and strong, and even Ishizu Tier didn't even see the emergency ban list, right? We had that format for a
Even
good
though
couple of months.
Technically should have, because it was
It
essentially
probably should have.
It was essentially
But
a Pepe 2.0.
But they let it run rampant, right? And so it'll be very interesting to see, because if they do hit some of these meta decks, right? Runic cards, Naturia cards, which Naturia cards are probably not going to hit, but the Runic cards definitely. Kashtira getting hit. What other like Labyrinth maybe getting a hit. Maybe Sword Soul finally getting a hit. Hey, I love Lab.
What we do?
But a lot of these decks, you know, if they get the hit and you know that whack, we're just gonna see unchecked super heavy, unchecked purely, and maybe Manadome, even though that deck right now looks a little weak. It's very interesting to see what direction Konami goes with it, because they have to make that ban list with Duelist Nexus in mind.
correct.
It's not just one set. It'll be the next set and possibly the set after that. So you're looking, 2.5 sets in advance in terms of your ban list, in addition to the next competitive season. All in all, it's just time will tell. But if history's shown us anything, Konami definitely has certain patterns and trends in which they're trying to make a ban list, so it'd be very exciting to see what they do.
Oh, absolutely.
Between now and YCS. I think YCS Philly's the next big event coming up. And if not, then Duelist Nexus, or maybe even after. Who knows?
I think a little bit earlier, but
I mean, for all we know, we could also just see, like, with regards to a big ban list coming up, we could also see it after either Nationals or Worlds. So, I mean, that's literally right around the corner. I mean, it's right around the corner. Basically, Duelist Nexus would be the start of the new season, and that could be when we get, like, a potential, like, maybe not a slaughter, but at least a potential reset.
Oh, please, right. No. Tell us what you guys think, when you guys are done watching this.
Yes, please.
Please tell us.
Blame me in the comments.
Yes.
Roast all of us in the comments. Don't
forget to subscribe, like, comment, hit that notification bell to get the notifications for the next time we drop a video. You guys knew we had to do it. Mandatory plug at the end.
Yes, and from all of us here from Team People Rainbow, thank you so much for watching, and take care. See ya.
Have a good night.
I didn't fall asleep.